Hey everyone. I'm Ed Biden. I'm the co-founder of Hustle Badger, and I'm going to be leading this webinar on project management for PMs. Just to get us started, be great to hear where you're all from. So if you could just say hi in the chat, say where you're dialing in from, and if you have any particular questions about this topic, please put them in the chat either now or throughout the call, so I can get round to them at some point. Now, just as some kind of like ground rules or kind of guidance, this call is being recorded and we will send you out the recording and the links that I mention at the afterwards, so you don't need to worry about that. Please stay on mute so others can hear unless you're asking a question. And actually, it's kind of better if you ask questions in the chat just so that we can keep things moving. I'll try and answer questions as I go along, and then at the end, I will definitely leave time for questions if you've got any more of those. So just a quick intro to Hustle Badger. If you haven't heard of us before, then Hustle Badger is a kind of comprehensive end-to-end platform that provides support for product teams. So we are, incredibly practical advice. I've been a product leader, CPO, VP for 10 plus years now. We've designed a lot of our guides as almost like a recipe book so that you can get going immediately. You don't have to go through a course to kind of find out the learnings. You can have it open as you're doing things. And then we try and cover everything. So it's comprehensive. It covers all the essentials, all the foundations you need as a product manager. And we also really care about your career acceleration. So we want to make you look good as an individual. Now, we do that through a whole range of different things. We've got courses, templates, a wiki. We do webinars like this. We've got a private Slack channel for members and workshops. So that's the other thing, is we try and provide a range of different learning formats. Some of these might not work for you, but the idea is that some of them will. So whatever your learning style, however you like to digest content, we've got something for you. Now, this webinar about project management, this is effectively an extract from one of our courses, our product execution course. This is all about understanding the drivers of team velocity and learning how to ship really quickly. So I'm going to run through a couple of case studies effectively from my experience as a product leader, talk to you about how I've shipped products like incredibly fast and give you some tips on how you can do that yourself. And with that, I will get going. All right, so this is kind of like the dirty little secret of kind of mature product teams, is that sometimes you just need to ship stuff, right? And even very sort of mature product teams like Stripe, these are digital first product operating model type of companies, will have these projects where someone outside an individual product team has made a decision that we need to ship a new product, we need to do a deal or a partnership, and this is then a cross-functional effort to make it happen. You should not see this as a cop-out or a problem. This is actually a way that you as a product manager can have significant amounts of impact and really help the product team deliver huge amounts of value. So don't shy away from these as the product manager. I would lean into this. Project management is a executive skill. It's something that you have to be able to master if you want to get to the highest levels in your organization. And you might want to be doing kind of more strategic work sometimes. That's fine. That has value too. We're just saying, like, don't be afraid of the project work as well. Two case studies I'm going to talk about where I've led these projects as a product leader to deliver lots of value. So first one was a company called Campsy, or rather a product called Campsy. So at the time I was working for Rocket Internet. This was about 2016. And we launched an e-commerce site from scratch. Now, that was quite a small team. So it was a single cross-functional team effectively that I was leading, 3 engineers. The benchmark that Rocket Internet had for launching a new business in those days was 100 days. And we launched Campsy in 28 days. So that's 4 weeks from me, meeting the engineers for the first time to us going live and getting our first orders. Second case study I'm going to talk about is expert tracks. So this was at the height of the pandemic, sort of like 2021, back end of 2021. And here we were launching a new course type, business model. This was about 40 engineers, 5 product teams, a whole bunch of other people across the rest of the organization, marketing, content, partnerships, working on this, about 150 people in total. And there, the last time FutureLearn had done a project like that, it had taken them a year and a half, and we managed to do that in 4.5 months. So in both cases, we were going about 4x faster than the benchmarks. I'm going to kind of flip between these two different case studies as I go through and explain what we did and what allowed us to go so quickly. But essentially, it was like really, really solid project management basics. So why is speed like really important? Um, 3 really good reasons. Like, firstly, time is money. Product teams are really expensive. If you're taking a lot of time, then you're costing a lot of money. And all things being equal, you want to go faster. Second thing is, if you're slow, the competition has a chance to catch up or break away from you, and that is a bad thing. So whereas if you can move faster than the competition, eventually you're going to beat them. So you always want to be as quickly as possible. And third reason, the faster you move, the faster you learn, and the faster you can iterate. So you get better customer outcomes, better business outcomes when you move quickly. So 5 drivers of velocity that I'm going to run through here: tight alignment, ambitious timeline, lead indicators, robust comms, and psychological safety. And if you follow these 5 guidelines, then, as I say, you can generally unlock just shipping much faster than you would do otherwise. We'll start with this one, tight alignment. So for Campsie, situation here, the way that Rocket Internet builds businesses is it kind of identifies a market, commits to it, and then figures out what it's going to do. And so Rocket had decided it wanted to build a camping business before it had even decided on the business model. And we had a discussion about whether we were going to go down the sort of the Airbnb route, the kayak route, or the booking.com route. So were we going to be a peer-to-peer marketplace like Airbnb? Were we going to be an aggregator like Kayak or Skyscanner? Or were we going to be a transactional platform like booking.com? And effectively, like that, we couldn't do anything till we agreed that. So what we decided to do was we were going to become the booking.com for camping. And with that decision made, that streamlined a lot of other things that we wanted to do. So with that decision made, then we knew roughly what the site was going to look like. The other thing that we decided really early on was to speed things up, and also which kind of streamlined a lot of the questions about what the site was going to look like, what the product experience was going to look like, was that we were going to copy an existing Rocket business and effectively just convert it to campaign. And I'll show you a little bit what that looks like. So on the FutureLearn side, launching this new product, Expert Tracks, where we started with this product, with this project, was looking at our portfolio. So we had kind of 2 main products. We had a much bigger portfolio than this, but these were the 2 main products. We had micro credentials, which were very low in terms of volume. So number of enrollments was low, but the value of each micro credential was quite high. So it's like £500 or £600. And then we had short courses, which were very cheap. They're about £30 or £40 per person, but we might have tens of thousands of signups for them. So we were looking for something that was in this sweet spot where we would make actually a few £100 per person, per learner, but we'd also get thousands of signups. And as a response to that, we took inspiration from Coursera, which had a very similar overall business model for FutureLearn, working with top tier universities to take their courses and bring them to market for consumers. And they had this product called Specializations, which had helped them grow tremendously in their early life cycle. This was a subscription product that was perhaps 3 to 6 months long. You'd take not a single short course like we were doing a lot of at FutureLearn, but effectively you bundled these together. So you take maybe 3 or 4 short courses back to back over a 3 or 4 month period, and then you charge a subscription whilst that was going on. So that was, high level what we wanted to do. But again, by being really clear on what the product experience was, because we had a very solid reference, then that was one of the things that really unlocked growth. And the message here isn't that you need to be cloning someone else to go really quickly. It's that you have to have that really clear idea of where you're going. The product vision needs to be really clear. That could be a reference, like we used at FutureLearn, where we had Coursera. It could be that you've just done your own product vision piece, right? And you've done all the discovery around that. And because of that clear vision, everyone knows what you're building and you've got that really tight alignment. So either way, you need that tight alignment so that you're not asking, every couple of days, wait, are we doing a free period? Or are we not doing a free period? Are we doing, a price point of £29 or £39? All those questions are answered because it's the questions that you need to answer that often slows you down when you're developing things. Second driver of velocity here is an ambitious timeline. And this is a really powerful kind of psychological device to drive you to go faster. And it dictates a lot of the ways that you work. So Campsy, so again, this is Rocket. We started at this first black line here. So I'm hoping you can all see my mouse. So the first black line on the left-hand side here, that was when we kicked off, early March. And we knew by looking at Google, search traffic that, and obviously in Europe, camping related search terms really ramped up over the summer and then they died off over the winter. Okay, fairly obvious there. If we wanted to, see if this business had potential, which was effectively the goal, then we really needed to get to market as quickly as possible whilst we were in the early stages of the season and before we'd kind of missed some of that year. So starting at that point, that first black line, if we'd taken 100 days, we would have launched at this gray line in the middle. And you can see we're already well into the camping season then. So our goal was to launch it, as I say, much, much faster in 3 or 4 weeks. And where we actually launched was at this second black line, where you can see that the camping season is still ramping up. So here we really had a kind of very data-driven approach about why we wanted to launch early. It made a lot of sense. For expert tracks, we had a similar rationale. Now, if I'm honest, this was not quite as data-driven as Campsy. So we could look at short course enrollments and we could see there was a big spike in January, sort of new year. People think about self-improvement, they start wanting to learn. Honestly, there are a lot of metrics that didn't really show this trend. And but I wanted to create the same kind of psychological urgency with the teams about when we were going to launch. And so I set us the goal of launching by the end of the year. So in both cases, what that did was it allowed us to fix the timeline and change, vary the scope according to the timeline. So instead of asking, how long is this going to take to build, we were always asking ourselves, like, what can we do in X amount of time? We'd set the amount of investment in terms of time and therefore money we wanted to spend on these things, and we built what we could with that investment. To give you one kind of micro example of that, for Campsy, when we were, I think, about a week out from launch, we realized we hadn't built in email notifications and receipts for people who booked. So you could book on the website, but then apart from a little pop-up on the website, there was no confirmation. You wouldn't get any emails or anything. And we realized that was obviously, not okay, even for an MVP. That was not going to work. We just get a ton of customer complaints about people who were confused about whether they'd booked or not, or whether the site had taken their order. So I went to the engineers and said, look, we need to have these confirmation emails. What can we do? And initially the engineers started talking about implementing a known solution. It would take a couple of months. And I was like, whoa. Like nothing in this project is taking 2 months. Like the entire kind of build timeline is 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So we need a different solution. And I pointed out to him, like, if we couldn't build something in 2 or 3 days, I was going to be sending these manually, basically, these emails manually based on transactions we could see coming into the database. So what could we do, even if it was super hacky, that was better than that? And then we could improve from there. And eventually we kind of agreed on some solution where we didn't have a scalable email server. We just had a really simple trigger on the front end, which sent people a confirmation email and we could track. And this was, say, like not really secure, not really scalable, but it was good enough for the first couple of weeks. And then after that, we could upgrade it to something better. So that was a kind of very powerful one. It came from this deadline that we had. So I was saying, you go from this approach of asking how long will it take to build things to what can we build in the next number of days. One thing that allowed us to move really quickly at Campsie, I mentioned we had this other product that we wanted to change. So Zen Rooms was another Rocket portfolio company. It was a hotel booking platform. And what we basically decided to do was turn this green. So we turn it from being a hotel booking platform to being a camping booking platform like this. And you can see I've highlighted the checkout page here because what's different between camping booking or booking a campsite and booking a hotel room. When you book a hotel room, you say the number of people who are going to stay there and the number of rooms that you want. And those are kind of like, in the dates. And for camping, you still want the dates, but all campsites make a distinction between adults and children and also the type of camping. Are you in a tent? Are you in a caravan? Or are you in an RV camper van? So that was basically the only change that we made, only significant change that we made to the site. Everything else was cosmetic, like green. Now, this now kind of looks fairly trivial because you could probably build Campsy in, 2 hours with Replit or Lovable or one of these no-code tools. But if you go back to the time where we were doing this, which is 7, 8 years ago, then Stripe was an up-and-coming company, and we didn't use it because it was too new. So that's kind of like just a product of its time, effectively. Although what we got done at the time was reflected when we were building it. The expert tracks, it was slightly more complicated. The scale of the projects I mentioned was 5 product teams for about 4.5 months. So here we had to combine all of our short courses into expert tracks. We had to rebuild the discovery journey. We had to rebuild certificates for the whole project, add in a new assessment where learners could grade each other. And then we had to put in the actual subscription payments where we used Chargebee for this. So there were kind of multiple different things coming together. And effectively, we created or we assigned one product team to tackle each of these different work streams. But that was what allowed us to then move quickly. Okay, so you've got your tight alignment, you know what you're building, you set yourself a really ambitious timeline. You then need lead indicators that you are on track, you're going to deliver against your goal, so that if people are struggling for any reason, you can then course correct and get back on track. At FutureLearn, we had this sort of giant Gantt chart, of which this is a kind of only one section of it, that tracked out all the epics we were working on across all the different product teams. So you can see it kind of goes off the page here. You can just see the first 3 teams here. And week by week, we tracked how people were doing. We project into the future. You can see that we've got our delivery deadlines as these kind of like gray lines coming down at the end of the year. And the top left corner, you can also see the number of days left until our kind of go, no go. So it's just really, really visible about how much time we had left, where we were in the progress of things. And so we could see exactly where we were. We also had a slightly more granular view that we were looking at on a team by team basis. So these overlapped a little bit, but it was sort of worth having because the level of detail we got to on this view was really useful. Whereas on this other view, this view was really great for coordinating across different teams and particularly with non-product teams. And then this more detailed view, this delivery review, was really great for seeing exactly how individual teams were performing and how they were tracking. So here you can see effectively in the middle, you've got the burn down charts of the different epics again, but we're also tracking things like the number of engineering days that teams have, how much time they're spending on keeping the lights on, operational load, that sort of thing, and whether they've hit their key milestones. So this gave us a really kind of strong signal or an early signal about whether teams were going to make the deadlines. And you can see, if you look at this top team here, you can see they're sort of doing things fairly normal kind of Gantt chart style till the middle of the project. And then there's this point where they suddenly break into like multiple parallel work streams. That happened because we could see halfway through, 2 months out from the deadline, that we were not going to be able to ship in time. And the team came to me, they asked, what should we do? Should we push back the delivery deadline? And I said, no, look, we're gonna hit our deadline, go away, have a think about what you need as a team to make your deadline, and then we will have a chat. And if we can make it happen, we'll make it happen. So team went away, they had planning with engineers and so on, brainstorming about what they could do. They came back, they said their plan was to break up the team, which was, a team of about 5, 6 engineers, into 4 parallel work streams, but they needed 2 extra engineers to do that. Then they could have, 4 pairs of engineers working on 4 parallel work streams, and they'd get done what they needed to get done. That then became a fairly simple problem for me and my director of engineering to solve. We pulled 2 engineers from another team, dropped them into this purchases team that was falling behind, and they got back on track almost immediately. So that kind of forewarning or kind of visibility about whether we were on the right track or not meant that we could provide them with the support that they needed to hit their time, their deadline. And just a great example of like why that kind of trajectory planning is really important. Okay, you got your lead indicators as well. Next thing is really important is robust comms. So at Campsy, we had this Kanban board where you can see the kind of the lanes on it. These aren't just engineers or product teams. This goes across the whole company. So we ran Kanban across the whole company for about 6 months. So we've got marketing, product, we've got sales, ops, strategy, development in there, HR, finance. We had everything from registering the company name, developing a brand, getting our first ads out, through to the epics we were working on in the product team on this board. And we did daily stand-ups with the whole company. That made sense because initially we were 7 people, right? And we had a time frame of 3 weeks, but it provided this kind of transparency across what we were doing that was really, really cool. Obviously at FutureLearn, much bigger team, you already saw the Gantt chart where we were, running a check-in weekly on that. But we had a bunch of other things going on that were keeping everyone aligned on what we were going. So we had multiple all hands presentations where we explained the context to people, what we were doing. We had dedicated Slack channels. We had internal FAQs. We were doing public product reviews. And then going into the kind of last 2 weeks before launch, I was then sending daily emails basically to the whole company, giving people an update about when we were going to launch and what the status was, where we're going. That was so successful that effectively coming into the middle of December, I realized we'd set our deadline to launch by the end of the year. But that meant we'd be large numbers of the team be going away for Christmas for a couple of weeks, not touching the code, and then coming back, and then 9 a.m. on their first day back in the office, they'd be switching live this huge amount of code. So this call, you can see where everyone's thumbs up, is the teams voting to actually release 2 weeks early so that they could soft launch things before they went on holiday for Christmas, and then let it run, sort of without any marketing support. And then the January 1st date become the marketing launch rather than the product launch. So this whole program of comms and giving the teams control meant that we not only hit our deadline, we actually launched it ahead of schedule, significantly ahead of schedule. And that was not a top-down decision. That was a bottom-up grassroots decision about how the teams wanted to launch. Final kind of point I'm going to cover today then is psychological safety. So if you're moving really, really quickly, then things will go wrong. So you're working fast, so you're probably limiting the functionality that you're putting in place. You're fixing your timeline, and you're flexing your scope. You might be filling things, plugging gaps behind the scenes with manual operations. You might be incurring technical debt. that you're going to pay off later. You might just be kind of working really quickly and be making mistakes. And in all those cases, you kind of going to accept that those things are the trade-off for launching quickly, and you've got to have the mindset that that is okay. And so your mindset has to shift from a sort of, oh, we made a mistake, how did this happen, to being like, we don't care how it happened. We know it was going to happen. How are we going to fix this? What do we need to do together as a team? Um, product leaders, ICs, everyone, to get back on track. We're not going to care about whose fault it was. We're just going to ask what are the next steps. We're not going to ask what our plan B is. We're just going to ask, like, what do we need? So your mindset is all around this, mistakes are expected. That is not a problem. We are always looking forwards. We are always looking at how do we get back on track and how do we support each other. So that kind of mindset, it surprised me going to Rocket Internet initially. When I joined there, Rocket didn't have the best reputation in terms of being like lovely, fluffy culture. It had a reputation for being like very high performance, and they had this culture absolutely. Um, and really quickly, it made sense to me because Rocket was all about moving quickly. And the only way you can move quickly is if people feel that, they can be right at that kind of red line where, they're moving as fast as possible. And yeah, they might make the odd mistake. And actually, that doesn't matter because making the odd mistake and fixing it is going to be a lot faster than double checking everything as you go through. So, just to summarize kind of what we've talked about there, I talk about there's like two ways that product creates value. Red phases are these projects that we've been talking about. These are, big strategic projects which generally involve multiple different teams, not just in product, but marketing, ops, sales teams as well. There's almost always a very senior commitment to them, a senior sponsor who is accountable for that decision, and there's conviction that this move will kind of deliver impact. That's quite different from what I call blue phases. This is kind of product operating model style, where you have an empowered product team. You actually don't know what you're building. Product teams are given a problem space to go and tackle, and the product team itself then is accountable for results, not a senior stakeholder. Now, that's important because actually your role is kind of very different as a PM in both of those cases. If you're in a red phase, the risks that you're tackling are all around timeline, technical feasibility, usability. So it's all around like, what does this actually look like? Can users understand it? How does it take to build? In blue phase, you're much more talking about value problems. Like, is this a problem worth solving? Do users care? And then what is the solution fundamentally that we choose? So either way, though, your goal is to reduce risks up front. And I think that's almost one of the key ways I define what the role of a product manager is. It's reducing risk on large investments in technology. In the red phase, your role is going to be very much like making it happen, managing scope and timeline, reducing usability and technical risk, and keeping everyone informed. And in your blue phase, your role is going to be defining the problem, figuring out what needs to be built, delivering business results. These are two very different modes of working. Now, in some businesses, you might find these are actually just two completely different roles and completely different people. But in most startup scale ups, what you'll find is actually product teams will be in one or other of these phases broadly, and you'll switch between these two different modes of working. It's critical that you understand which mode you're in, because applying the principles and the ways of working from like incorrectly is counterproductive and will lead you to kind of fail. So if you're in a red phase, but you're acting like you're in a blue phase, so you've got a big strategic project to deliver, but you're acting as though you're an empowered product team and you're responsible for results, you're going to start questioning everything. And that's going to make you look like, you're going to be questioning like whether you should be building this thing, what's the timeline, and that's going to make you look egotistical. It's going to make you seem obstructive, and it's going to make you seem like you don't understand the big picture that you're trying to deliver on. Conversely, if you're in a blue phase and you're acting in like a red phase, so you've been given a problem to solve, and you're just kind of shipping the backlog and not really asking the bigger questions about what is the fundamental problem we need to solve here, you're going to seem like you have no strategy, complete lack of vision, complete lack of ambition, don't understand the commercial realities of the business. And again, you're not going to be a success. So fundamental question to ask yourself is like, which phase are you in, and then to act appropriately. Okay, that was a super whistle stop tour through two different modes of working, red phases, blue phases. And then if you're in a red phase, what is the right way to work? If people have questions, I'm super happy to answer them now. You can either stick up your hand or stick them in the chat. Zoom have a stick up hand? Or just ask me by coming off mute.
Hi, Ed. Not so much a question, but just, yeah, thank you for that. It was really helpful. Actually, it is a question. Do you have any more information or stuff I can read up on around these two phases? It just feels very relevant to kind of what I'm working on at the moment. So I'd love to kind of read up a bit more around the two phase. Oh, perfect.
We do, yeah. So as we say, we'll send out these links, and so we've got a bunch of articles in our wiki that digs into various aspects of this. Project management is probably like the top one you want to have a look at, quarterly planning and so on. Yeah, I would start there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Quick question again about the phases. When you swap from one phase to the other, have you historically recognized that publicly with the organization? Is it an explicit thing? Because I've seen similar sorts of things, like something goes horribly wrong and everybody needs to get on it, and you work in a project mode for a while and then flip back. But it's not quite as explicit as red and blue phases. And I really like the idea of making that explicitly communicated.
Yes, I think yeah, as I've really recognized that there are these two different modes of working, then I've tried to make that much more explicit with the teams. Both as a product leader with the PMs, but then as a PM, like with the engineers, because I think if you try and, particularly as a product leader, if you try and make a team work in a red phase on a project, and they're expecting to be an empowered product team, they feel like you're completely, gutting their role and don't know what you're talking about product wise, and saying like, hey, look, actually, this is super high value for the business. This is for a limited period, and this is why it matters. And providing that context is really helpful for, making people realize that their value's still for what they can do strategically, what they can do discovery wise. It's just not kind of what the assignment is right now.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, Selin has a question here. How do you define when is a red phase and when is a blue phase? Yeah, so I'd go back to this slide. So red phases are they're generally big strategic projects. I would say this is, accountability is held by a senior stakeholder. They probably have a solution in mind. You're almost certainly going to be working with teams outside of the product team, marketing, sales, operations, as well as other product teams. You might need to coordinate with them. And effectively, there is a business case for why you should build this, but you are not the owner of that business case. And in a blue phase, you're given a problem to solve or an opportunity, right? You don't know what the solutions are. Stakeholders shouldn't be telling you what the solutions are. They should be saying to you, like, you go figure out the solutions and you deliver on the results. And so you as a product manager are then accountable for results. I think that kind of almost like the trickier question is like, when are you in a red phase and it's healthy, and when are you in a feature factory and that's unhealthy? And the differences between them, like a red phase is usually temporary. There is a business case, it's just you haven't developed it. Whereas in a feature factory, often you might be accountable for the solution, even though you're not defining it. There might not be a business case or discovery, You're just being told to do something because the stakeholder feels like it, and it's not temporary. It's kind of like a permanent state that you are in. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Megan asking, how do you approach a red phase when there is no set senior stakeholder? So I think your first question is like, so I'm guessing, sorry, Megan, are you saying there's almost like multiple different stakeholders then that are involved, but no one person accountable for it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think what you can do there is just directly ask, who is the decision maker for when we have questions, if we have design questions or if we have, need to agree on approaches, like who do I go to? So you want to tackle that ambiguity head on, because otherwise you'll end up like every time you have a question trying to coordinate between three different people. Stuman is asking, is it not the case that mostly a new work starts from the blue phase and some point entering the red phase? It can be, right? So yeah, I mean, you can definitely get times when you start in a blue phase, you're doing more discovery, and then as you figure out what you want to build, you might have quite a lot of delivery that you need to do, and you transition into a red phase and you just ship it. I've definitely seen that when we've been working on quite big changes to the user experience. So I don't think that's wrong. Sometimes I think when you're in a blue phase, then you are just shipping things like quite rapidly all the time. And so you never really need to kind of like, you need to maintain your discovery on a continual basis. And you never really kind of like just go heads down and start shipping in the same way.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ed.
Anthony's asking, I'll stop sharing. Anthony's asking, as a project manager stepping into product management, how do you balance the timelines with the iterative and strategic nature of product development? Yeah, I think one way I do this is to frame, is to make the timelines fixed. And you can make the timelines fixed by sort of asking people, okay, you want me to look at this opportunity or look at this solution, whatever you're calling it, this initiative. What is the appetite for this? What is the budget for, how much time do we want to invest in solving this? And you don't ask, how long will this take to build? Because that will give you some kind of scope that you need to fit within. If then you start to do discovery and you realize that actually it's maybe a much bigger opportunity than you first thought, then you can go back to stakeholders and say, hey, actually, look, we're getting really good results. We think there's a much bigger opportunity here. We think we should extend that investment or increase that investment. But you always do it on that kind of business case of not how long will it take to build, but what's the opportunity? What are we going to invest in it? And then you fit what you're going to build to that fixed timeline. Okay. Question from Peter. What's the best course of action if you're continuously working in a red phase, but you don't have enough discovery clarity to execute efficiently? Yeah, great question. So I've seen this happen really often where PMs get into this mindset either on their own or because of pressure from stakeholders where they kind of have to, like feed the beast, like the engineers are just, churning through work, and you feel like you need to kind of keep creating work for them to build. And what can often happen there is that you don't, you become very incremental in your thinking. You don't really do enough discovery. You don't have a good enough idea of why you're building things, and your success rate on things that you're shipping and the impact that things you're shipping plummets. It just goes down a lot. And in that case, I think you need to firstly like establish what the problem is. So look at your track record of shipping and how much impact you've had, and sort of say, look, we last 3-4 things we've shipped haven't had the impact that we wanted. No one wants that as an outcome. How can we like do a better job? Then you can suggest kind of a more discovery as a solution to that, and then you can look at how you're dividing up your time, or how you're dividing up team responsibilities between you and other people in the team to create more time for things. Now, that might mean that you're asking engineers to do more kind of delivery work, break up their own tickets. They're going to do sprint planning. They're going to do a lot of the team overhead. It might mean that actually you're just going to let the engineers go and do, a week or 2 weeks of, bug fixing whilst you go and do discovery. It might mean that actually you negotiate with your product leadership that you just have too many engineers on your team for the level of ambiguity that you're tackling. And actually you would go faster with a smaller number of engineers and maybe more designers or a user researcher, something like that. So it usually comes down to that ratio of how many people have you got doing discovery versus how many people have you got doing delivery. And you just fundamentally need to shift that ratio in favor of discovery. Cool. So hopefully that answers your question, Peter. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. No, cool. Okay, well, just as a reminder, we have this course. I'm just going to flash it up again. So we have this project management course. If you want to go deeper, I really suggest checking it out, or doing a quick search for red phases, project management, moving quickly, any of these terms. Do a search for those on the Hustle Badger website, and you'll get a bunch of things will pop up. Thank you all for coming along and your questions. I've really enjoyed this. We will send out the recording of this, as well as the links I've mentioned, and the link to this deck to everyone who's signed up. Okay, thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.